back. We're taking an inside look at Johnny Depp's legal team tonight, part 2 of our special here. And Chanley Painter sat down with Camille Vasquez. Let's watch more of her interview here, talking a little bit about the jury.
How important was jury selection in this trial?
Incredibly important. I mean, they were the decision makers at the end of the day. I had an idea of the type of jurors that I wanted. It's not what we got. I really thought that women were going to be better for us. And I just figured that women have, call it a sixth sense, right, for evaluating if someone is telling the truth or not. I was afraid that if Miss Heard was incredibly sympathetic and started to cry, that some members of the jury that were male were going to say, oh gosh, make it stop, just give her what she wants. Right. You know, and so I was very concerned about that. But as you know, because you saw the jury, we had a lot of young males on our jury.
But you sat closest to the jury the whole time, right there with Johnny. They could see everything you guys were doing. I know that's something as an attorney sitting up there you want to be cognizant of.
I always had a woman next to him.
Why was that important?
Again, I wanted to make sure the jury saw that we liked each other as people, but that none of us on the team were afraid of him, because we weren't. And, you know, Ben was always to his right as lead trial counsel, and then I always put a woman next to him.
What do you remember generally of that jury panel?
I think they took their job very seriously, as they should, right? And they came in every day, they listened to that evidence, they took notes. There really wasn't anyone falling asleep. I mean, it was entertaining. I'll give them that. But, you know, I give them so much credit, and I'm so grateful to them, and I know Johnny is as well.
Do you think his star power and appeal influenced the jury?
No, I don't. And I say that because we're dealing with two stars. I mean, she's a beautiful woman who's eloquent and intelligent. She's a movie star herself. Do I think Johnny's charisma influenced the jury? Absolutely, but that's who he is. He was natural up there, and I thought it was strange that Miss Heard responded to every question to the jury, and in fact, one of the jurors spoke out anonymously after to Good Morning America and said they found it bizarre, and you know, they felt awkward because they couldn't respond to her, obviously. And you probably saw there were two jurors that turned away from her while she was testifying. So,
the most surprising moment of the trial?
Probably Kate Moss testifying.
Talk about that. That was a moment that went viral.
I don't hesitate, I don't wait, I just, in my head, instantly think of Kate Moss and the stairs, and I swung at him.
That was, I think, a really surprising moment for all of us, including us, by the way, because when Ben, you know, did the fist pump saw around the world, we didn't have her committed. So some of us were actually concerned that I was sending a message,
Right.
And then if we couldn't produce the goods, you know, that wouldn't have been great. Yeah, I remember when Ben stood up that morning and said, Mr. Depp calls Kate Moss.
Good morning, Your Honor. Mr. Depp calls Kate Moss to the stand.
And one of the jurors, she's an alternate, but her mouth actually went wide open. And she immediately looked to the back of the courtroom to see if she was coming in person. And, you know, I thought, wow, that's a name that has quite an impact. She's a friend of Johnny's. She's committed to telling the truth, and again, had been silent for a long time.
He came running back to help me and carried me to my room and got me medical attention.
It just showed that Miss Heard doesn't care who she involves or hurts or defames. I mean, she was just shameless in the lies. And, you know, that's what I think what was so compelling for Miss Moss to be able to come forward and say, I've never been involved in any court procedure, ever, but I'm just sick and tired of this.
So let's move outside the courthouse, because it seemed like hundreds of people were showing up to watch this trial unfold. When did you realize this is going viral?
I went to get my Starbucks like I did most mornings, and the sweet girl with like braces called my name, and she, hands me my drink, and then she's like, "Oh my God, you're Johnny Depp's lawyer! You're Camille!" And I was like, what happened? In a matter of sleeping, just like 24 hours, what's happened? I think outside it was surreal and circus-like. I mean, really with animals and people dressed up. But it was a moment in time, something that I will never probably experience again. And it was really heartwarming too, because they were there supporting our client and supporting us. And gosh, everyone could use a little pat on the back. You're doing a good job.
Is being a part of the world's most high-profile trial, does it have a downside?
Personally, sure. Yeah, I think that, look, I went into law because I've never wanted to be quote-unquote famous, or I'm kind of a shy person. I value my privacy. And so, on a personal level, it's been, the loss of anonymity has been overwhelming.
Oh, you can kiss the anonymity goodbye. Ben Chu is still with us. Ben, first thing, the Kate Moss moment. Give us the significance of it all, and because that reaction, I mean, everyone was talking about it. We're still talking about it in our newsroom.
Well, we were excited. We had been frustrated because the judge is very even-handed. She made a lot of exclusionary rulings on both sides. She was incredibly fair throughout the proceedings. But naturally, we wanted to get people like Kate Moss and other women who wanted to testify for Johnny, people who had been involved with him, who could testify to the fact that he would never raise a hand and never had raised a hand, but that was excluded. But then when Amber opened the door, Amber opened the door so the court was able to reconsider her ruling and allow this in on rebuttal, because Amber herself had mentioned Kate Moss. She was trying to excuse her punching Johnny. She said she had to do it because if she hadn't, Johnny would have pushed her sister down the stairs the same way he pushed Kate Moss. And of course, that opened the door. We were very excited about that, and we did not believe that Amber would repeat that lie, but fortunately she did. And she did that in a similar case with the TMZ cameras attending the ex-parte TRO. She had said when she had no idea why the TMZ photographers, paparazzi appeared at that ex-parte TRO hearing. And then, of course, that opened the door to the TMZ witness coming forward and testifying that, in fact, it was Amber's lawyers who told them precisely where to be and where she would be and to photograph all of it. So she was hoisted on her own petard. That's why it was such an exciting moment for us.
And again, going back to your reaction to the courtroom, some of the folks here at Court TV wanted to invite you Friday night to the weekly Court TV poker game, if you want. Anyway,
you would have taken all my money.
Exactly. All right, Ben Chu staying with us. We've got more of Chanley Painter's interview with Camille Vasquez and other members of Johnny Depp's legal team. Still to come. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. I want to let you know that Court TV has reached out to Amber Heard's legal team from this defamation trial multiple times for an interview, and our requests were denied. There's a standing invitation for them to sit down and talk with us about their side of the case. We'll see if they respond. In the meantime, Johnny Depp's legal team did invite us up to New York and Camille Vasquez sat down with Chanley Painter for an interview. Let's show you more of that as we get more insight into what happened in Depp v. Heard.
Which witnesses presented the most challenges for your team?
She didn't have many live witnesses, right? I would say it was probably Dr. Hughes.
The main opinion is that Ms. Heard's report of intimate partner violence and the records that I reviewed is consistent with what we know in the field about intimate partner violence, characterized by physical violence, psychological aggression, sexual violence, coercive control, and surveillance behaviors.
I think Whitney, her sister, we were concerned about that, but I think Rebecca did a fantastic job, and she was very ill, as you might recall. But I think she did a really beautiful job of showing the jury that these were two sisters that truly cared for one another and were going to support each other no matter what, in a delicate, really graceful way.
And she helped support you? In part, I also was working myself, and yeah. And you're grateful to her for being there when you needed her, right? Of course. And just like she protected and cared for you, you want to protect and care for her, right? And when I can, of course, but yeah.
And as you mentioned, most of Amber's witnesses weren't live, including some of her friends. Why do you think that is?
I think, as we said in closing arguments, this is a person that burns bridges.
Sitting here today, do you still consider Ms. Heard a friend?
I wouldn't consider her not a friend.
What does that mean?
We don't speak. We are not enemies.
When did you first tell Ms. Heard that you were no longer interested in having her as a client and being friends with her?
Well, I just told Amber that, I wish her well and I just have no interest in continuing a relationship.
I don't think these people were her friends anymore. And I understand they testified the way they did, but most of them had already given testimony during the divorce, had been deposed during the case, and so they were locked in to a version of what they claim happened. And that's not to say that they were lying or not telling the truth. Something else that's really important to note here is none of these people saw abuse, not one.
One of my favorite parts of the trial was watching you keep your finger on the microphone. And you would literally object to every question Elaine Bredhoff asked.
Trying to say that...
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
He was drinking...
Calls for speculation and leading.
To sedate
Objection,
me?
Your Honor, hearsay.
Did the table collapse?
Yes, it did.
Objection, Your Honor, leading.
Because he didn't share it until this date.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained. Was that dark colors before, or?
Objection, Your Honor, leading.
I said, was that dark colors before?
I'll sustain the objection.
There was no way we could have predicted that redirect was going to go so badly for them. I mean, it really seemed like she had put it together at the last minute. It was some notes that she had on a notepad. There's a part of me that almost feels badly for her as a colleague. What I remember about that redirect was, I think at one point she said, "I'm trying here, I'm trying." And I looked over to that side, and no one was helping her. They were all just, in their seats, looking down, and I felt so badly because our team was incredibly different. They knew every question. They were predicting the answers. They had the evidence, page and line, ready to go. It was just such a different process. I felt supported. It was shocking how ineffective that was.
Why did you tweet about the makeup and Mr. Waldman?
Because he was calling me a liar and a hoaxer and that this was an elaborate hoax just to get Johnny.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
I'll sustain the objection. Next question.
Next question.
Yeah, okay. I don't have any more questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. All right. Ma'am, you can have a seat next to your attorney.
How would you evaluate her as a witness?
I don't think she came off particularly likable or credible. I think the fact that she didn't own up to anything caused major concerns for the jury.
There was evidence of violence, even still. So how would you explain that?
Well, there was a victim of domestic violence in this relationship, and we say it was Mr. Depp. The person that ended up in the hospital after Australia was Johnny Depp. The person with any injury was Johnny Depp. The only person with medical records in this case was Johnny Depp. I mean, it was a violent relationship, except she was the aggressor.
She threw the large bottle, and it made contact and shattered everywhere. And I honestly didn't feel the pain.
He told Dr. Kipper that Amber had cut off his finger, and he said that only to Dr. Kipper as he was treating this bleeding finger. And we thought that qualify for the medical emergency exception to hearsay, and it did not come in. And, you know, to us, that was a key moment, because he didn't want to tell anyone, but he felt he needed to tell his doctor that was literally treating his finger on, you know, in a car, that she had cut it off by throwing a bottle at him.
Big part of the case. Ben Chu's still with us, Johnny Depp's lead attorney. Ben, let me ask you this, because I was in the courtroom as well, and there's a gallery, and it's like everyone there was there for Johnny Depp, you know, other than the media who's covering it, but the regular folks who showed up, all for Johnny Depp. You walk outside, people are cheering. Did it feel like a home game? Did it? Because, you know, I grew up playing sports, and you get the crowd going, all of a sudden it helps you, you know, play harder. Does that have any impact on a lawyer in the middle of a trial?
It really didn't, Vinny. We were really focusing on Her Honor, the judge, of course, and the jury. And irrespective of what the people were doing outside in the hallway or outside the courtroom, our real focus was on the jury and getting our work done. So it really didn't have the feeling of a home game, as you say, because what we were really focusing on were the people who were going to decide Johnny's fate.
How about this, though? Did it energize you at the end of the day when you get cheered and then you got to go back and do more work to prepare for the next day? Did it give you a little boost of adrenaline, maybe?
That it did. And seeing the alpacas out there dressed as Captain Jack Sparrow, and the level of detail and love that was put into the alpacas, yes, it did make it easier to work the late nights back at the hotel.
So the other big contrast between Johnny Depp testifying and Amber Heard, from my perspective, was the level of comfort. Like, Johnny Depp looked very at ease and comfortable. Amber Heard looked extremely uncomfortable. Why do you think that was while they were testifying?
Well, my perception is Johnny was at ease with himself because he was telling the truth. And even though there was a lot of focus and a lot of pressure on him, at the end of the day, when you're telling the truth, you don't have to remember things. You just tell the truth. And Johnny, you know, at the beginning, we talked about this a little bit last night. He was prepared. We told him that this was going to be an ordeal, and that everything was going to, you know, the worst recesses of his life were going to be exposed. And I think once he steeled himself to that, he was confident that he was doing the right thing and that he was going to tell the truth. And I think that gave him some peace. I mean, he has an amazing way of finding humor in the macabre. I mean, when his finger was cut off, for example, and we would all look down, you know, out of respect, and he would say, "Oh, I call it Little Richard." You know, I mean, he has a nickname for his finger, and that's just the kind of guy he is. He finds humor. He wants to put other people at ease, and you know, at the end of the day, I think he came across as who he actually is.
Big difference. I mean, stark contrast. All right, Ben Chu's going to stay with us. When we come back, we will have more of Chanley Painter's interview with Camille Vasquez. Don't go anywhere.